This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation.
Tonight, King Charles III gives the throne speech in Ottawa today, and Indigenous peoples were a key part of the events.
We're a little, Algonquin community in the middle of nowhere, Quebec, who has to, basically find ways and means and raise funds to be able to defend our rights.
A First Nation is condemning a disposal facility being set up to store low-level radioactive waste in Ontario.
They rallied supporters from all over and they won.
And a new documentary about the Mi'kmaq fight against fracking in New Brunswick. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Roughly 24 hours after he arrived in Ottawa on Monday, King Charles III wrapped up his whirlwind tour of Ottawa on Tuesday by reading the government's speech from the throne in the Senate, followed by a quick stop at the National War Memorial. Indigenous people were a key part of both events. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
The King began the speech from the throne with recognition of the Algonquin and Anishinaabeg people, an important role Indigenous people have played in the Canadian nation.
This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation. While continuing to deepen my own understanding, it is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
The event also featured the Ottawa River Singers and 18-year-old Manitoba Métis fiddler Morgan Grace. Interviewed later in the day, Grace said the significance of the moment was not lost on her.
That I'm so lucky to be here, and I know that it's not an opportunity that many people get, so I'm honored. And just being able to represent my family and the Métis people at home.
Former Algonquins of Bikwaknagan Chief and Canadian War veteran Wendy Jocko served as the bearer for the monarch when he laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Jocko said King Charles has come to Canada during a significant moment in the nation's history.
It's also the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and the liberation of the Netherlands. So it's quite a significant year, and it's quite significant that the King has come over for this ceremony and to meet Prime Minister Carney, because we've really walked a long way since 1812 together.
Our relationship is with the King.
Meanwhile, at a nearby event in front of the Chateau Laurier Hotel, First Nations chiefs from Western Canada responded to the speech from the throne. Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels said they appreciated the monarch's visit and the mention of Indigenous peoples in the throne speech, but it was a lost opportunity to meet with more First Nations leaders than just Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak.
For hundreds of years, they were having pipe ceremony with us in our lands, and that was the respect that should still continue. You can't create organizations and simply bypass the grassroots chiefs and the nations that make up this country. And so it's very important that those relationships are respected in a way, I think, that reflects what we need to be doing in this country.
The throne speech mentioned the creation of a major federal projects office, which would reduce the approval for major projects from 5 years to 2. After the speech, that remark caused Manitoba Chief Derek Neepanak to say, "Be ready, they're coming for us." Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A little later in the show, Mi'kmaq professor, lawyer, and activist Pam Palmater will join us to talk more about today's throne speech and the royal tour. In other news, Kibawik First Nation Chief Lance Haymond says reconciliation is a nice word, but says the federal and Quebec governments need to commit to reconciliation. As Savannah Craig reports, Chief Haymond held the press conference with supporters in Montreal this week to denounce a near-surface disposal facility that will be built to store low-level radioactive waste near Chalk River, Ontario.
They issued a permit to kill. That's what Section 73 permit is.
Chief Lance Haymond is talking about the federal government permitting Canadian nuclear laboratories to bury 1 million tons of low-level radioactive waste near Chalk River in a site about a kilometer away from the Ottawa River.
The facility, less than a kilometer from the Ottawa River, remains a serious threat to our lands, our waters, our rights, and to the health of millions of people in Quebec and Ontario.
Quebec began their fight against this proposed site more than a year ago in court. Last February, the federal court ordered the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and Canadian Nuclear Laboratories to consult the community.
We expect that this case will go to the Supreme Court.
He says this process will likely cost Quebec over $1 million.
We're a little, Algonquin community in the middle of nowhere, Quebec, who has to, basically find ways and means and raise funds to be able to defend our rights. And the challenge is that Canada and Quebec can keep us in court forever.
Chief Haymond says Prime Minister Mark Carney is new to the scene, so he may not be well informed of the issue, but says many in his cabinet can advise him.
I think about Minister Wilkinson, Minister Guilbeault, all these folks are still there. They took a position, which was in essence to do nothing.
A spill in this watershed will lead to irreversible consequences.
Assembly of First Nations Quebec and Labrador Regional Chief Francis Verreau-Paul says both the federal and Quebec governments need to take a stance against this facility instead of fighting with First Nations in court.
I don't think this is the best way to reinforce a relationship. So I'm really hoping that Quebec government will be open to have those discussions before putting project in place and respecting the will of the First Nations so that we can build a strong future all together.
This disposal facility will hold 1 million tons of radioactive waste and persistent chemical toxins like asbestos and lead.
Gordon Edwards is the president for the Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility. He says radioactive waste shouldn't be stored in the ground and left there, but put in packages that are labeled.
These packages should be strong enough to resist the forces of nature and prevent them from leaking. But of course, nothing can resist the force of nature forever. So it becomes an intergenerational problem.
Edwards also wants to see an end to the creation of radioactive waste.
That's what most Indigenous groups, when they learn about the nature of these materials, they say, number one, stop making it.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
A sad update now about an elderly Indigenous man who went missing from Edmonton last month. According to the Edmonton Police Service and the family, 66-year-old Brian Potts was found deceased after he went missing from the Royal Alexandra Hospital. On April 10th, Potts, who lives with dementia, was visiting his son in hospital when he suddenly wandered off on foot. 5 days later, Edmonton police say Potts was spotted on a number of transit buses in the Westmount area. At the time, the family was worried for Potts' well-being as he needed his medication for his dementia and diabetes. Sadly, on May 14th, Potts was located deceased and his death was deemed non-criminal by the Edmonton Police Service. The family says before his death, Potts waved down a taxi on Grout Road in Edmonton and asked the cab driver to take him to the town of Onaway, just 60 kilometers northwest of Edmonton. According to family, after a disagreement on pay, Potts unsure where he needed to go, the cab driver dropped Potts off on Township Road 540 and Range Road 21, just south of Onaway. After Potts told the cab driver he thought they were near his house. Search and rescue later found Potts deceased more than a kilometer away in a wooded area.
The dead end. That's where he got off, and he was later. My uncle walked down a cut line, going south, and it was probably about. The police said it was about 1.5 kilometers from where he got off, and that's where the search and rescue team found him on May 17th. My uncle played a really big role in our lives. And a lot of people, he adopted a lot of kids, and my uncle had a really big loving heart.
The Council of Yukon First Nations has announced the names of candidates running to be its next Grand Chief. 5 candidates are running for the job. Former Yukon Liberal MLA and current Vundut-Gwitchin First Nation Chief Pauline Frost, former Kluane First Nation Chief Mathia Alatini, former Champagne and Ijiak First Nations Chief Steve Smith, former Yukon Liberal candidate Rose Sellers, who has a background in real estate, and former Whitehorse City Councillor Ed Schultz, who previously served 2 terms as Grand Chief. Current Grand Chief Peter Johnson, who's held the position for 3 terms since 2016, is not running again. The election is scheduled to take place at the Council's General Assembly on June 25th. Still to come here tonight, we'll dig deeper into the throne speech and royal visit with Pam Palmater. Stick around. Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier in the show, King Charles III delivered the speech from the throne today. For more on the speech and the royal visit, we're joined by Mi'kmaq professor, lawyer, and activist Pam Palmater. Pam, great to have you with us. Let's just start with your thoughts on the throne speech by King Charles III, the first monarch to read a throne speech since his mother, Queen Elizabeth, did it well before I was even born.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for Canadians in general, it was very symbolic and ceremonial and probably very unifying, especially for people who follow the Crown and like the things that the Crown does. And in contrast to what's been happening in the United States, probably a positive on their behalf. I think also some positive in terms of the things that were said about Indigenous peoples. I was a little worried whether or not there was going to be any mention of Indigenous people. Sometimes we get sacrificed in the name of unity. Yeah, so I would say it was like 50-50, depends on who's looking at it.
Well, part of the throne speech, which if I recall, last time there was no mention whatsoever of Indigenous peoples. A part of this throne speech read, as Canada moves forward with nation-building projects, the government will always be firmly guided by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. In reacting to that part of the speech, one chief, Derek Nepenak, was warning to be ready and be aware, because that means they're coming for the resources. Is that your take on the speech?
I mean, it could be, right? Because, being guided by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, if you're a Justice Canada lawyer, that can mean, oh, well, we're just, considering it kind of thing, versus this is now a legislated right. We know from Supreme Court of Canada that it's consultation, accommodation, and consent in many cases. So it could be a positive indication that maybe they're going to, require consent. At the same time, I always worry when they're saying, oh yes, and we're going to rush, we're going to speed up approvals, and we're just going to go full steam ahead. That's what concerns me. I think if they truly are guided by our constitutional rights and free, prior, and informed consent, then they'll sit down with us now and find out what projects can go ahead, what can't, and what projects could potentially go ahead if environmental damages were mitigated, for example.
First Nations leaders have been holding press conferences the last 2 days and saying they should have been part of the royal visit itinerary. Do you think they were more of an afterthought here?
Well, it's hard to say because the ceremonies opened up with, Métis, with Inuit, and with First Nation openings, and you saw all three groups at the actual speech from the throne. You saw a large number of, I can only presume, were First Nation chiefs actually in the audience. But you're always going to get some on both sides, right? So some who don't have treaties direct with the Crown are probably like, and others who, well, our treaties are directly with the Crown. We wanted an audience. And so I didn't think that was ever going to happen. Mm-hmm. Should it have? Yes, of course. I think they're long overdue to actually talk to their treaty partners. But that being said, I did see a significant contingent of Indigenous peoples at the ceremony itself.
Right. Just briefly and lastly here, Pam, I guess your thoughts on the pomp and circumstance of it all, and no doubt the cost of, what was less than a 24-hour trip here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, for Canadians, I'm sure that this was a wonderful, symbolic, ceremonial thing. And if they're happy that their tax dollars went to that, so be it. On the Indigenous side, you're going to have people on all sides some who equally say this is amazing, and others who are like, wait a second, the Crown didn't even meet with us. So interesting, I think, vis-a-vis the United States, it's a nice pushback to them. So I did appreciate it for that purpose.
Right. Pam, we'll leave it there, but always appreciate getting a chance to talk with you.
Thank you.
More than a decade ago, the Elsipogtog Mi'kmaq Nation in New Brunswick fought back against fracking and won, resulting in a provincial ban on fracking that has been in effect until this day. The events in the aftermath of the protest is captured in a new documentary called Featherfall. Aussie Michelin produced the 20-minute documentary, He's Labrador Enoch, who is working for APTN News when he reported on the anti-fracking protest. It took place back in 2013 near the Elsipogtog Mi'kmaq Nation and lasted over 6 months. At one point, it escalated into a tense confrontation between police and protesters. Feather Fall features the impacts of the protest, including personal accounts that Michelin hopes will inspire others. Feather Fall will be available on the National Film Board website on June 2nd.
They stood up for their rights. They rallied supporters from all over, and they won because of it. And I think that provides this message of hope and showing that we can do it. And I think that it's an important film for Indigenous people and an important film for anybody out there who is fighting for their homes.
Looking forward to seeing that. Some of our current affairs programs are wrapping up this week, including Face to Face tonight. We'll bring you a preview of the season finale after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Fran Etzel of Ross River, Yukon submitted this stunning shoreline panoramic view of Francis Lake, which is also located in the Yukon. Thanks for sharing, Fran. You can send your photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, sunny and 26 for Fredericton and Halifax. 11 with showers in Kuujjuaq, rain in Nain and a high of 8. 27 with the sun out in Montreal, sunny and 26 in Val-d'Or. 21 in Sault Ste. Marie, sunny and 27 for Ottawa. 23 in Thunder Bay and Sioux Lookout. 28 in God's Lake, smoky, and 26 in Puckatawagan. 27 under sunny skies in Winnipeg and Dauphin. 28 in Regina, sunny, and 29 in Saskatoon. 26 and sunny in Buffalo Narrows and La Ronge. In northern Alberta, 31 and sunny in Peace River, 32 under sunny skies in Grand Prairie. 29 with the sun out in Edmonton, 28 in Lethbridge and Calgary. Sunny and 24 in Vancouver, 34 in Kamloops. 28 in Prince George, cloudy, and 19 for Dease Lake. 16 in Old Crow, Beaver Creek, and Whitehorse. 22 in Yellowknife, 21 and sunny in Norman Wells. +1 and cloudy in Sax Harbor, 5 in Pawlatuck. 7 in Chesterfield, 16 in Arviat, 2 in Resolute, and Aglulik. A wildlife photographer got a special surprise over the weekend when she spotted a mother moose with not one, not two, but 3 baby moose calves. Photographer Amy Bragg snapped some adorable photos of the mother moose and her triplets in Anchorage, Alaska on Saturday. Studies show moose triplets are rare and only occur in 1 out of every 1,000 births. Bragg says the sighting was unusual, but also incredibly special.
That was just, so exciting, totally unexpected. That I have lived in Alaska in Anchorage for over 40 years, and I have seen triplets once before. They are very uncommon, and so to see 3 was just totally unexpected and just so exciting.
We're wrapping up season 11 of Face to Face tonight, right after the news. Our guest is veteran actor Billy Morasti. And after 40 years in the business, Morasti feels like his role as Roger Laughingstick on the comedy series Acting Good has rejuvenated his career. Season 4 of the series is being shot in Winnipeg right now, and Morasti hopes Acting Good continues for several more years.
There's a lot of issues to explore in a comedic sort of way. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so popular, because Indigenous issues can be very serious, and it can turn off a lot of people because, I don't want to hear about that. It's too heavy. It takes away from my joy, even though we have no choice but to live it as Indigenous people here. So I think it's great that we have a show that is comedic and addresses issues through the sense of humor, because sense of humor is so very important in the Indigenous community. And it can only grow.
And you can catch our interview with Billy right here in just a couple of minutes' time. Of course, for news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. We're going to leave you tonight with some sights and sounds from day 2 of the royal visit from the King and Queen. Good night.
To the House of Commons and acquaint that House that it is the pleasure of His Majesty